A millionaire fell into a coma, and the cleaning lady cared for him. When he woke, he was shocked by what he saw. The sun shone intensely over Chicago, casting a brilliant reflection on the glass towers and the shimmering turquoise waters of Chicago River. The city, alive with energy and motion, was about to witness an event that would remain etched in the minds of all who attended. Sometimes, those who should be tending our gardens are the very ones who pluck away our petals, the saying went, echoing a sense of bittersweet truth. Tyler Hamilton, a young millionaire with striking dark eyes and neatly styled black hair, drove his luxury car through the bustling streets of Miami. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his crisp white shirt buttoned up under a perfectly fitted vest, every detail meticulously chosen for this day. The day he was supposed to marry the love of his life, Veronica Coleman's. His heart raced with excitement, his palms slightly sweaty as he imagined the moment when he would finally stand at the altar, looking into Veronica's eyes. He could picture her radiant smile, the way her gown would flow down the aisle, and the life they would build together in this vibrant city. But just as the city hummed with life, so did the unexpected hand of fate. As Tyler navigated the busy streets, his phone began to ring. The sound broke his train of thought, and when he glanced down at the screen, Veronica's name was flashing insistently. He hesitated. I should answer, he thought, knowing full well it wasn't the best idea while driving. With one hand still on the wheel, Tyler swiped his finger across the screen to accept the call, forgetting in his rush to activate the hands-free feature. Tyler, Veronica's voice burst through the speaker, sharp and impatient. Where are you? I'm already at the church. All of our guests are here, waiting for you. How could you possibly be late to our wedding? Don't you even think about standing me up? Veronica, I'm really sorry, Tyler stammered, the guilt already rising in his chest. I'm almost there. I got caught in traffic. Traffic, she repeated, her frustration palpable through the phone. This is our wedding, not some random meeting. How can you be late on the most important day of our lives? Get here now. I'm on my way, I promise. Just give me a few more minutes, Tyler tried to assure her, his voice calm, but his nerves fraying. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his mind now juggling the tense conversation with his focus on the road. But the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text after text, call after call from Veronica, each more urgent than the last. The weight of her impatience pressed heavily on Tyler, and he found himself pressing down on the accelerator in an attempt to make up for lost time. His heart pounded, his hands slick with sweat as the tension between the calls and the road grew unbearable. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, a truck appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. Tyler's instincts kicked in, and he jerked the steering wheel to avoid the collision. The car swerved violently to the side, tires screeching as it veered off the road and into a ditch. For a split second, everything went quiet, and in the next heartbeat, the world went black. Sometimes, darkness presents an opportunity to discover the light. The church was adorned with an air of elegance, where every corner was embellished with white flowers, casting a serene atmosphere. Soft, melodic tunes played in the background, offering a sense of calm to the space. Guests, dressed in their most elegant attire, exchanged curious whispers, all asking the same question: where was the groom? Veronica, positioned near the altar, stood tall, but struggled to maintain her calm exterior. Her emotions were on edge, and her impatience was starting to become apparent. One of the bridesmaids leaned over and whispered, "Where do you think Tyler could be?" "Maybe he's just had some kind of delay," another bridesmaid suggested, her voice steady, trying to diffuse the rising tension in the room. The loud ringing of Veronica's phone suddenly broke the silence. Her face drained of color as she hurriedly answered the call. "What?" she exclaimed, her voice trembling as her hand flew to her mouth in shock. "I'm truly sorry, ma'am," the voice on the other end said with solemnity. "Your fiancé has been in an accident. He's alive, but he's in a coma. He's currently at Central Hospital." Veronica felt her entire world crumble in an instant. Her knees buckled under the weight of the news, and she had to grasp onto the nearest pew to prevent herself from falling to the ground. A mixture of anger and despair surged within her, creating a whirlwind of emotion that she could barely contain. "This can't be happening," she shouted, her voice laced with anguish. "Now I have to go to the hospital? I hate hospitals." Veronica was inconsolable, the news overwhelming her mind, despite the efforts of her family and friends who rushed to her side to offer support. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to think clearly. She decided that before heading to the hospital, she needed to return home to change out of her extravagant wedding dress. The idea of stepping into a hospital wearing such an elaborate gown was unbearable to her. After arriving at her home and slipping into more comfortable clothes, she finally made her way to the hospital's emergency room. The doctor's updates were grim. While Tyler had no physical injuries, he had suffered a severe concussion and was now in a coma. They could not predict when or if he would wake up. Veronica was beside herself with worry, but deep down, it wasn't just Tyler's medical condition that troubled her. What gnawed at her more was the abrupt halt to the grand event she had spent so much time planning. Her dream wedding, the centerpiece of her year, was now a distant reality. The glamorous ceremony, the lavish reception, and the honeymoon across Europe were all cancelled in an instant. This unexpected disruption left her deeply unsettled. As the days passed, Veronica's visits to the hospital grew less frequent. When she did visit, her time there was brief and uncomfortable, her dissatisfaction clearly visible. It became obvious that her frustration wasn't just about the situation, but also about the growing resentment she harbored toward the halted wedding plans. After a couple of weeks, it was rare to see her by Tyler's bedside. On the rare occasions she did stop by, her words were cold, dripping with exasperation. "I need you to wake up, Tyler," she would say quietly, almost as if she believed her voice could pull him from his unconscious state. "I can't stand to see you lying here, useless when we were supposed to be traveling across Europe." Tyler, meanwhile, was the owner of a thriving business he had inherited after the tragic loss of his parents in a plane crash several years earlier. Now, he lay unconscious, while Veronica's visits and emotions became increasingly distant, preoccupied by her own unmet expectations. Without any family around, and barely conscious, Tyler found himself relying almost entirely on the rare visits from his fiancée. However, on the very day of his accident, a young Latina immigrant named Alice had started her job as a hospital cleaner. She happened to be in the hallway as Tyler was rushed by on a stretcher towards the emergency room. For reasons she couldn't fully explain, an overwhelming tenderness washed over her as she stopped what she was doing just to watch him pass by. After Tyler was stabilized, doctors moved him to a room where he would remain in a coma. A few hours later, Alice, continuing her cleaning duties, was taken aback when she realized the young man she had seen earlier was now lying in the very bed she was assigned to clean. A quiet whisper escaped her lips. "It's him." She had a single tear in her warm, kind eyes, as if his presence had moved her soul. The dimly lit room, with just a sliver of light peeking through the window, seemed to be filled with an unusual peace whenever Alice entered. The young woman softly smiled as she glanced at the patient's name on the bed's ID tag, her dark, wavy hair framing the plain cleaner's uniform she was wearing. She carried an aura of kindness and hope that stood in stark contrast to the growing coldness and apathy of Veronica, Tyler's fiancée, whose visits had become increasingly rare. Each time Alice came into the room, Her heart was full of compassion and love. She would gently take Tyler's hand, sitting by his side, as if that small gesture alone could convey all the strength she wished to give him. "You've got amazing things ahead of you," she whispered softly, her voice filled with affection. "Don't give up. The secret to waking up is believing you can." From that day forward, Alice would bring fresh flowers to his room every morning, ones she had grown herself in her garden. Their vibrant colors and fragrant scent filled the sterile hospital room with life. She carefully arranged the bouquets on a small table in front of Tyler's bed, ensuring they were always in his line of sight, just in case he opened his eyes. Alice selected flowers with the most exquisite aromas, hoping they might somehow help awaken him. These flowers are for you, a small reminder that the world outside still holds so much beauty for you to see, and each new day is a fresh opportunity to awaken. Just like these flowers bloom anew each day, her voice whispered softly, filled with hope. With careful movements, making sure no one noticed, she would quietly sit beside him, gently stroking his hair, as though each touch was a silent vow of love. An impossible, forbidden love, but one that would last forever. At times, she would lean forward and plant a gentle kiss on his forehead, her lips moving with a practiced tenderness. Through that kiss, she conveyed all the affection and devotion she carried in her heart for him. "Pure love can conquer everything," she would murmur softly into his ear. "I love you with all my heart, Tyler. All I want is for you to wake up and find happiness again." She would then carefully massage his hands and feet, dedicating time in secret to ensure he felt cherished and cared for, even if he couldn't respond. She always brought delicate lotions, applying them with the utmost gentleness. She took joy in spreading a little oil to encourage his circulation, her every motion filled with infinite tenderness. She made sure no one was there to witness her devotion. Each touch became a reflection of her care, a reminder to him, even if he couldn't consciously realize it, that he was not alone in this journey back to life. "You have a spirit that can't be defeated, Tyler," she would say, with a smile full of warmth as she tenderly massaged his feet. "I know you'll return to this world stronger than you've ever been. If you can dream it, you can make it happen." The days stretched on, and with each of her visits, Alice's presence became a ritual, filled with love and hope. She spoke to him of her dreams, of the future she envisioned, and confided her deepest thoughts, as though he were her most trusted confidant, despite the silence that surrounded them. "I've always believed in miracles," she confessed one day, her eyes welling with tears. "And you, Tyler, you are my miracle. I know you'll be okay because, even though you're silent now, there's something inside you, something kind and honest, that I can feel is still there." Each phrase she whispered was a gentle reminder of life, a message of encouragement, urging him to keep fighting, not to surrender to the darkness of his unconscious state. "Never underestimate your power to overcome the challenges before you," she would say, her voice like a melody of hope. "Life is a gift, and there's so much more waiting for you to experience." One day, as she adjusted his sheets, carefully rearranged his pillows, and made sure everything in his room was perfectly in place, she continued her quiet routine, her usual smile on her lips, still whispering softly into his ear as if he could hear every word. "Don't lose hope. You can make it." The sharp clack of heels echoed through the corridor, drawing her attention, and soon after, the door was flung open with a sharp movement. An expensive, sophisticated perfume's potent scent immediately filled the room. Standing at the entrance was a woman dressed in a sleek, tailored designer suit, her eyes cold and unforgiving as they landed on her. It was Veronica, Tyler's fiancée. There she stood, tall and commanding in her high heels, radiating confidence and an air of superiority. Without hesitation, Veronica's piercing voice rang out, directed at the cleaning lady. "What are you doing so close to my fiancé?" "Are you a nurse?" she asked, in a condescending tone. "The last thing Tyler needs is a cleaning girl hovering around. Finish up and leave." Alice, lowering her head and keeping quiet, moved away from Tyler's bedside, returning to her task of wiping down the surfaces. Within moments, she quietly exited the room, doing as she was told. But before stepping out entirely, Alice couldn't help overhearing the conversation that unfolded behind her, words that cut deep. Veronica, speaking to Tyler, who lay unconscious in his hospital bed, didn't hold back her disdain. "I'm a young, beautiful woman. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life waiting for you to wake up. And you know, I don't believe in miracles." Her voice was sharp and unfeeling. "I'll wait a respectable amount of time, just enough to avoid any scandal, but that's it." As she left the room with her cleaning cart, Alice felt a profound sadness settle over her. Her heart ached as she reflected on Veronica's cold words. Sometimes, the people who should care for the flowers in our garden are the ones who rip away their petals, she thought. Knowing those cruel words came from the woman engaged to the man she secretly loved, only deepened her pain. Lost in thought, Alice wrestled with her emotions. "I only want his happiness," she told herself. Nothing more. Yet from the hallway, she stayed vigilant, watching for the moment Veronica left. The second the woman stepped out of the room, Alice rushed back in, her heart racing, desperate to counter the hurtful words that could wound Tyler's spirit, even in his coma. She leaned in close to him, her voice soft but filled with emotion, whispering tender words of encouragement. "True love never gives up," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "And I won't give up on you, Tyler. You will wake up. I know you will. If you can imagine it, you can achieve it, and I'll imagine it for you, to help you reach it." Before leaving, she spoke one final promise. "I have to go now, but I'll be back tomorrow with more flowers for you, and I'll bring you a gift I know will make you smile." The next day, the humble immigrant cleaning lady slipped into the room again, this time with beautiful roses that she gently placed in the vase she always kept for him. He carefully pulled his old cell phone from the pocket of his uniform, choosing a track before looking at her with a soft smile. "Last night I wrote a song for you," he said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "This is my gift to you." Without waiting for her response, he took a deep breath and began singing, his voice steady and filled with emotion. The melody was gentle yet uplifting, and his words were full of hope and inspiration. Alice listened intently, her eyes never leaving him as he poured his heart into each lyric. When he finished, she leaned forward, kissed him tenderly on the lips, and whispered close to his ear, "You're stronger than you realize." She gently cupped his face, her fingers brushing his cheek, adding, "You can conquer anything you set your mind to." Later that same day, an emergency alarm blared loudly through the hospital hallways, its sharp sound breaking the usual calm. Nurses and doctors immediately rushed toward Tyler's room, where something unexpected was happening. Tyler, who had been unresponsive for months, was finally showing signs of recovery. The nurse overseeing him, heart pounding in her chest, hurried to check his vital signs. As she stood over him, his eyes slowly opened, blinking as he tried to focus. A hushed murmur spread through the medical team that had gathered, watching in stunned disbelief. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. It was a miracle. As Alice quietly pushed her cleaning cart down the hall, she overheard the whispered conversations between the hospital staff. "The young millionaire is awake," one of the nurses said in awe. A rush of joy surged through Alice, but it was tinged with a deep, aching sadness. "What matters most is your happiness, Tyler," she thought to herself, repeating the words like a mantra as she realized her time with him was coming to an end. Now that he was awake, she knew her presence would no longer be needed, except for cleaning. His fiancée would stay by his side constantly, and Alice would no longer have the chance to stand close to him, to whisper words of encouragement in his ear. The thought filled her with sadness, but it was a bitter-sweet sadness mixed with happiness for his miraculous recovery. The complexity of her emotions left her feeling torn apart inside. Not long after, Tyler's fiancée, Veronica, arrived at the hospital. Her tall, elegant frame stood out among the crowd of hospital staff. The rich scent of her expensive perfume wafted through the air as she walked, her sharp, calculating eyes immediately locking onto Tyler's room. She moved with purpose, and as soon as she entered the room, she saw Tyler lying in the bed, weak but awake. He was struggling to focus on her as she approached him. "Tyler," Veronica exclaimed, her voice a mix of relief and reproach. "I can't believe you're finally awake. You have no idea how worried I've been." She paused for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts, before continuing, "Now, we can get back to planning the wedding and look forward to our honeymoon in Europe." Tyler, still groggy and disoriented, offered her a small, weak smile. But there was a flicker of confusion in his eyes, as if he was struggling to fully comprehend the situation. Veronica, used to being the center of attention, moved quickly to close the distance between them. She bent down to kiss him on the forehead, but in her haste, she accidentally knocked over the glass of water that had been sitting on the bedside table. The glass fell, and the water splashed onto the floor, creating a small puddle. "Oh no, this elegant dress nearly got soaked," Veronica exclaimed, frowning deeply. "This is the last thing I needed right now." Without wasting any time, she swung open the door of the room and spotted Alice far down the hallway, busy cleaning. Her voice cut through the quiet hall, sharp and demanding. "Hey, cleaning girl," she shouted. The sound of her voice echoed down the corridor. "Get over here right now and do your job." Alice, startled and a bit shaken, immediately stopped what she was doing. With her head lowered and shoulders slumped, she slowly made her way toward Tyler's room, feeling the pressure of the situation weighing heavily on her. When she entered the room, Alice didn't dare lift her eyes. She simply began to clean up the mess Veronica had made, moving quickly but carefully. Her heart raced with a mix of emotions. Joy because Tyler was recovering, but deep sadness because she knew their time together was coming to an end. The pain of that reality gnawed at her as she worked. Meanwhile, Veronica's patience was wearing thin, and her frustration only grew. His eyes followed Alice, and something about her voice triggered a memory, faint yet familiar. It was as if he had heard that voice somewhere before, in a distant, half-remembered moment. With a noticeable effort, Tyler spoke up. "Wait, stop," he said, his voice shaky but firm. "Say that again." Veronica, completely baffled, turned toward him, confusion etched across her face. "What are you talking about, Tyler?" she asked, her tone a mix of confusion and worry. "Have you lost your mind? You've been in a coma for too long." But Tyler paid no attention to her concerns. His entire focus was now on Alice. "Speak," he insisted, his voice suddenly filled with urgency. "Tell me your name." Alice, feeling the weight of both their stares on her, hesitated. Her eyes remained downcast, her embarrassment growing with each passing second. In a voice that trembled slightly, she answered, "My name is Alice. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir." Veronica, upon hearing her name, scoffed with disdain. She crossed her arms and, with a mocking tone, added, "Alice, what a plain name. fitting for someone whose only job is to clean. I don't know what you think you're doing here, but that's enough. You're here to clean, not to bother my fiancé. Tyler, however, could no longer contain the surge of emotion that had been building inside him. A slow but glowing smile spread across his face as he murmured, "It's you. It's really you. It's always been you. You're real. The woman from my dreams is real." "I didn't just imagine you." Veronica, completely taken aback, instinctively took a step backward, staring at Tyler as if he had lost his mind. "What are you talking about, Tyler?" she demanded, her voice rising in disbelief. "What is going on? This is ridiculous." But Tyler, his eyes now fixed firmly on Alice, pressed on, his voice filled with excitement and emotion. "It wasn't just a dream. All that time, when everything was dark and hopeless, I kept hearing a voice that filled me with hope, a voice that gave me the strength to keep going. Now I understand that it wasn't just my imagination. It was your voice, Alice. It was you." Alice, suddenly overwhelmed by the weight of his words, couldn't stop the tears from welling up in her eyes. She took a small step back, her emotions flooding to the surface, unable to fully grasp the intensity of the moment. Veronica, now both furious and humiliated, tried to interrupt, her voice sharp with frustration. "This is absurd, Tyler. You don't know what you're saying. You're clearly delirious." But Tyler didn't acknowledge her outburst. His entire focus remained on Alice. He reached out toward her, his expression soft, his eyes filled with deep gratitude and tenderness. "Alice," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion, "you were the one who kept me alive. It was you. You brought me back to life." Alice, her heart pounding in her chest, was at a complete loss for words. Her mind raced as she tried to process what Tyler had just said, but deep inside, her love for him, the quiet, unspoken devotion she had carried, began to resonate within her. For the first time, she felt a sense of purpose in everything she had done. Unable to stand it any longer, Veronica, convinced that Tyler had fallen into some sort of delusion, turned away from them both, her anger and confusion boiling over. "This is insane. I'll be back tomorrow to get you discharged, and I expect you'll have come to your senses by then. Remember, we still have so much to catch up on before the wedding," she exclaimed, storming out of the room, her exterior calm, but her heart seething with confusion and anger. Tyler, still holding Alice's hand gently, looked deeply into her eyes. In that moment, everything that had happened between them, all the silent sacrifices she'd made, seemed to come alive in their shared gaze. Alice spoke in a barely audible whisper, her voice trembling with the weight of emotions she could no longer hold back. "Thank you. Thank you for everything." Her tears flowed freely, rolling down her cheeks as she tried to find her voice, but all that came out was a shaky, fragile murmur. "You don't have to thank me," she replied, her voice soft yet filled with sincerity. I just want you to be happy." The words were simple, but they carried all the unspoken feelings between them. The room became heavy, with a profound silence, thick with all the emotions that had built up over the months they had known each other. It was a silence that held the weight of unspoken love, of hopes that had quietly grown, and of dreams that had finally bloomed into reality. Tyler, his face serene with a peaceful smile, slowly reached out to her, pulling her gently into his arms. As they embraced, neither of them spoke. Words were unnecessary in that moment. There was a mutual understanding, a connection between them that transcended speech, something far deeper than anything they could have explained. It was a bond that had been formed in silence, in moments of darkness, and now, in the light of this shared experience, it was revealed as something pure, a miracle that had grown quietly between them. The next morning, Veronica arrived early, eager to help her fiancé get ready to leave the hospital. She was bright and cheerful, with a relieved expression on her face, happy to finally take him home to his mansion. Tyler, still moving slowly and feeling the emotional weight of the previous day, stood at the hospital entrance, saying goodbye to his doctor. His mind was a tangled mess of emotions, and his body still felt sluggish. Veronica, glowing with relief, stood firmly beside him, holding onto his arm with a smile on her face. The doctor gave Tyler the last bits of advice for his recovery, but Tyler barely registered the words. His thoughts were elsewhere. His eyes kept scanning the hospital entrance, the hallways, and the surrounding area, anxiously searching for the cleaning girl, Alice. Each second that passed without seeing her felt like a weight on his chest, an inexplicable sadness growing inside him. His gratitude was real, but beneath it, something much more profound was beginning to stir, a feeling he didn't quite understand yet. From a hidden corner of the hospital, Alice watched the scene unfold. Tears welled up in her eyes as she saw Tyler standing there with Veronica. The sight of him with his fiancée was like a sharp knife to her heart. The pain was so overwhelming that she had to quickly retreat, hiding herself to avoid being seen. She knew, deep down, that she didn't belong in his world, that they were from two entirely different lives. Yet, despite knowing this, the love she felt for him consumed her, burning painfully within her. "Is everything clear, Tyler?" the doctor asked, bringing him back to the present moment. Yes, everything's clear," Tyler replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He nodded, but the presence that had brought hope to his darkest days was still far away in his thoughts. Veronica, noticing his distraction, tightened her grip on his arm, her patience starting to wear thin. "Let's go, Tyler. We need to leave," Veronica said in her usual firm and commanding tone. Tyler, after taking one last long look at the hospital behind him, slowly nodded, his expression reflecting an internal struggle he couldn't quite shake. As they made their way to the car, Tyler's footsteps felt unusually heavy, as if invisible weights were anchoring him to the ground. Every step was deliberate, slow, as though part of him didn't want to leave. "I'll drive," Veronica said, as she swiftly slid into the driver's seat. She adjusted the rearview mirror with practiced precision, not waiting for any response from Tyler. He quietly slipped into the passenger seat, offering no resistance, simply letting her take the lead. Even as the car began to move, Tyler's mind remained far away, still back in the hospital room, replaying the moment over and over, the scent of the roses filling the air, the stillness of the room. On the road back to the estate, Veronica launched into her usual chatter, filling the space between them with an endless stream of words. Her voice was bright, almost mechanical, as she went on about the wedding plans, every little detail as though it was the most important thing in the world. "Tyler, can you imagine how incredible it's going to be?" Veronica exclaimed, her excitement bubbling over. "The wedding is just a week away. Everything's already planned to perfection. The venue is decorated with the most gorgeous flowers, ones you've never even heard of, and the chef, oh, he's prepared a menu that will blow everyone away. And the honeymoon? It's going to be spectacular. We're going to visit the most exclusive places in Europe, and we've booked rooms at all the top hotels. It's going to be the event of the year. Everyone will be talking about us." Tyler barely reacted. Her words washed over him, distant and hollow, like the faint murmur of background noise. In his mind, all he could think about was the hospital room, the quiet peace of it, and the tender care Alice had shown by bringing fresh flowers each day. The delicate fragrance still lingered in his memory, so different from the sterile world Veronica was describing. The stark difference between those warm memories and the sharp, almost cold tone of Veronica's excitement left him with a strange, heavy sadness. He didn't fully understand it, but the feeling was undeniable. "Tyler, are you even listening?" Veronica snapped, her eyes flashing briefly with irritation as she glanced over at him, noticing his distracted gaze. "Yes, of course," Tyler answered automatically, his voice dull and absent. He barely knew what he was agreeing to, but it seemed to satisfy her enough to avoid further questioning. Veronica frowned, her annoyance clear for a moment, before she brushed it off, choosing not to press the issue. She was far too immersed in the whirlwind of wedding preparations to pay much attention to what she saw as Tyler's lingering effects from his coma. As they pulled up to the mansion, Tyler felt a strange sense of discomfort settle over him. The grand estate, which once stood as a symbol of everything he had worked for, now felt stifling. The sheer luxury, the towering walls and the ornate furnishings now felt empty, devoid of life. All the things that had once given him pride and comfort seemed cold and meaningless compared to the quiet warmth of the hospital room. The mansion that had once been his refuge now felt like a prison. Over the next few days, Veronica threw herself headfirst into the final preparations for the wedding. Each day, Veronica would repeat the same tasks, going over the same points, determined to make sure everything was perfect. The gowns, the jewelry, the invitations, everything had to be nothing short of perfect. To her, the wedding wasn't just an event, it was a grand spectacle, a day that needed to reflect her social status and leave an unforgettable impression. "Tyler, come over here and check out these centerpiece ideas," she called out repeatedly, showcasing collection after collection of elaborate floral arrangements and lavish decorations. Each time, Tyler followed her without protest, silently watching as she made every decision, while a growing sense of emptiness quietly gnawed at him. There was a void in his heart, a feeling that something essential was missing from his life. Their conversations had become shallow, empty of any real substance, and Tyler found himself drifting in thought. More and more often, his mind wandered back to the young immigrant girl who had been his only source of comfort during those long, lonely months in the hospital. One afternoon, while Veronica was in the ballroom, locked in a heated discussion with the wedding planner over the table placements, Tyler slipped outside. The vivid, exotic blooms that surrounded him as he wandered through the mansion's expansive garden did not help him forget the roses Alice had given him while he was recovering. Kneeling down, he plucked one from the bush, but as he raised it to his nose, the fragrance felt artificial, too manufactured, lacking the pure, genuine scent he had once cherished so deeply. With his eyes closed, Tyler let himself slip into a brief, vivid memory. For just a moment, he could almost sense Alice standing beside him, feel her comforting presence. He could hear her gentle voice, whispering words of encouragement and hope, just as she had done so many times during those long hospital days. His heart raced at the thought of her. The sound of her voice, so soft and kind, so different from the cold, surface-level world that now surrounded him. "Tyler, what are you doing out here?" Veronica's voice shattered his reverie, pulling him harshly back into reality. She stood at the doorway, watching him with a thinly veiled impatience on her face. "Nothing, just thinking," he responded, dropping the flower and standing up with a heavy sigh. "We don't have time for you to be off daydreaming," she said, her tone sharp. "The wedding is only days away, and you need to be fully present. Everyone is going to be there, expecting to see you at your best, an accomplished businessman who's in control. We can't afford any mistakes." Tyler nodded, though the feeling of entrapment weighed even heavier on him now. He knew that the life he was walking into, filled with pretense and appearances, no longer felt like his own, but he was too exhausted and too conflicted to fight it. The days flew by in a blur, and frantic preparation took over the mansion. Veronica, as always, looked flawless, overseeing every detail with precision, ensuring everything was set exactly as she had envisioned. Yet, as the wedding drew closer, the unsettling feeling in Tyler's heart only grew stronger. Tyler felt the weight of the question, and almost immediately, a torrent of memories began to surge through his mind. The soft whispers of Alice echoed, her gentle words of encouragement that she had spoken while he was unconscious. He could vividly recall the scent of the fresh flowers that had filled the room, their fragrance soothing and sweet. And then, just as clearly, the melody of the song Alice had sung to him the day he finally woke up washed over him, flooding his senses. It was that song, Tyler realized, that had sparked his return to consciousness. It was the key that had drawn his soul back from the shadows, awakening something deep inside him. In that instant, everything became unmistakably clear. The fog of confusion that had clouded his mind lifted. The harsh, cruel words of Veronica came rushing back to him with startling clarity. He could now remember the disdain in her voice as she coldly said she didn't believe in miracles, that she wasn't willing to wait for something she deemed impossible. He remembered the piercing pain her words caused him, a pain so deep that it cut through even his immobile state where he couldn't move, speak, or respond. And yet, in stark contrast, Alice's face came to him, with all her tenderness, her silent devotion, her unwavering love that asked for nothing in return. He started to say, his voice shaky but growing with determination as he fixed his gaze directly on Veronica. I remember everything now. Veronica's expression shifted, her confusion evident. What are you talking about, Tyler? She asked, her tone edged with impatience. Tyler drew in a deep breath, steadying himself, and continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. I remember what you said to me while I was in the coma, Veronica. I remember you telling me you didn't believe in miracles and that you weren't willing to wait. I remember how, in those moments when my life was hanging by a thread, you were more concerned about postponing our wedding and the honeymoon than whether I lived or died. A ripple of shock spread through the church, whispers rising from those in attendance. Veronica's face turned pale, her features twisted with a mix of disbelief and growing anger. That's not true, she blurted out, her voice louder now as she tried to regain control of the situation. You don't know what you're saying. You're confused from all the time you spent in that coma. But Tyler shook his head, his resolve firm now, a calm settling over him. No, Veronica, I'm not confused. I can see it all clearly now. And I also remember something else. That girl, the young immigrant, who was there from the beginning, who I didn't even know, who had never been a part of my life before. She cared for me with more love and dedication than you ever did. It was her, not you, who gave me the strength to wake up. She brought me back to life. His voice grew quiet but powerful. She never stopped telling me, if you can imagine it, you can achieve it. Veronica stood frozen, staring at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? That insignificant girl from the hospital. Her voice was laced with contempt. This is ridiculous. I thought you were just delirious from the coma. What's going on at this wedding? This has to be some kind of prank. But Tyler wasn't paying attention anymore. His mind was made up, and his heart knew the truth. Veronica, I can't do this, he said firmly. My heart belongs to someone else, someone who has shown me what love really means. He paused for a moment, his eyes steady and unwavering as he faced her. I'm sorry, but I can't marry you. The words landed like a bombshell, shattering the silence in the church. Veronica stood there, stunned, before her shock quickly turned to fury. "This is absolutely insane. You've lost your mind, Tyler," she shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "You can't do this to me. I'm Veronica Coleman's. This wedding is the most important event of the year, and you're just going to walk away?" Her voice rose with each word, but Tyler had already stopped listening. He felt a calm determination he hadn't felt in years. Without another word, he gently let go of Veronica's hand, took a step back, and moved away from the altar. "I'm truly sorry," Veronica said, quietly but firmly. "But I know you'll recover. You'll find your next millionaire soon enough." With that, he turned his back on the chaos and walked out of the church, leaving behind a bride boiling with anger and a crowd of guests who were too shocked to speak. Tyler quickly got into his car and sped off, his heart racing. The streets blurred around him, the lights of the city flashing by as he drove straight to the hospital. He had one destination in mind. When he arrived, he parked in a rush, not caring about the spot, and ran inside, his heart pounding harder with every step. "Where's Alice? The cleaning woman? The one from another country?" he asked breathlessly as he approached the nurse at the reception desk. "I need to find her, right now." The nurse gave him a confused look, trying to understand the urgency. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't know exactly where she is. She works in housekeeping, but I'm not sure which part of the hospital she's in at the moment," the nurse explained, her voice calm, but unsure. Panic started to creep in as Tyler realized time was slipping away. He couldn't lose Alice now, not after everything they'd been through. He looked around frantically, his eyes locking on the hospital's intercom system. It was his only chance. Without hesitating, Tyler turned back to the nurse. "Please, I need to use the intercom," he begged, his voice filled with urgency and desperation. The nurse looked startled by the request. "Sir, we don't allow visitors or patients to use the intercom system. That's for authorized staff only," she replied, her tone firm but sympathetic. But Tyler wasn't ready to give up. His eyes met hers, filled with determination. "Please, it's an emergency. I have to find her. I'm begging you, if you believe in love, help me. Just this once," he pleaded, his voice softening with emotion. The nurse paused for a brief moment, uncertainty crossing her face. But there was something in Tyler's voice and the way he looked at her that moved her. With a slow, deliberate nod, she took the intercom microphone into her own hands. Her voice rang out across the hospital corridors. "Alice, the cleaning staff, please report to the side entrance of the hospital immediately." Tyler sprinted toward the entrance, his heart hammering in his chest. Every second that passed felt endless, stretching into what seemed like hours, until finally the door creaked open. Standing there was Alice, dressed in her cleaning uniform, her face a mixture of surprise and confusion, clearly not expecting to be called so urgently. "What's happening?" she whispered to herself, scanning the area but seeing no one around. Just then, she felt a soft touch on her shoulder. Startled, she spun around quickly, her eyes widening as she saw a man standing there. His face was hidden behind an enormous bouquet of roses, the bright flowers spilling over his arms, almost as if they were too much for him to carry. "Who are you?" Alice asked, her heart thudding loudly. "You must have the wrong person. I'm just the cleaning lady." Without uttering a word, the man slowly lowered the bouquet, revealing his face. It was Tyler. His eyes were brimming with emotion as they gazed at her intently, filled with a warmth and affection that stopped her in her tracks. "No, Alice," Tyler spoke softly, his voice filled with sincerity and emotion. "You're so much more than that. You're the woman who has captured my heart." Alice's face flushed deeply, and her thoughts raced. She was utterly bewildered, struggling to find words. "You shouldn't be here," she stammered, her voice almost a whisper. You're supposed to be at your wedding. Why are you here? I just want you to be happy." With a gentle smile that lit up his face, Tyler took a step closer, his presence radiating warmth. "You are my happiness, Alice," he whispered softly. His words hung in the air as he leaned in, pressing his lips to hers in a tender, heartfelt kiss, a kiss filled with the unspoken promise of a future they had yet to fully realize. Pulling her into a tight embrace, he whispered again, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise you, this is a love that will last a lifetime." Then, from his coat pocket, Tyler retrieved a small velvety box. Opening it slowly, he revealed the most beautiful engagement ring Alice had ever laid eyes on. Her breath caught in her throat as tears welled up in her eyes. Without hesitation, Tyler gently took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. In that moment, all the chaos and uncertainty melted away. This was their commitment, a love born in an unexpected place, in the darkest of times, now shining brighter than ever. With the bouquet of roses in one hand and their love sealed in the other, Tyler and Alice walked out of the hospital side by side, ready to embark on a new journey together. A journey filled with love, hope, and the belief that true miracles always find their way into the light. If you'd like to help stray animals, it's simple. Just subscribe, give this story a like, and share it on WhatsApp. Leave your name in the comments for a personalized shout-out. And don't miss the next story, where a bank denies a loan to a black immigrant, but fate takes an unexpected turn. The ending will leave you speechless. Blessings